Some thoughts on Ukraine. As the Trump administration pauses military aid to Ukraine and Western liberals continue their shrieking meltdown over Trump hurting Saint Zelensky's feelings, it's probably worth reminding everyone that the Russian invasion of Ukraine was indisputably provoked by Western aggressions. That's why so many Western experts and analysts spent years warning ahead of time that Western aggressions were going to provoke an invasion of Ukraine. Now, some may hear this and say, okay, but Russia still shouldn't have invaded even though our Western leaders were aggressively provoking them to. But before you do that, it might be a good idea to look inside yourself and ask where that impulse is coming from. Why are you so eager to skip past the part where you criticize your own rulers for their role in starting this war and focus solely on criticizing the leader of an Eastern government who has no power over you? What is it inside of you that's flailing all over the place trying to avoid any forceful scrutiny of the reckless warmongering of your own government and its allies? The last time a foreign rival placed a credible military threat near the border of the United States, the U.S. responded so aggressively that the world almost ended. If you want to know just how close we came to nuclear annihilation during the Cuban Missile Crisis, look up the name Vasily Arkhipov. Western liberals have been conditioned to insist that Russia should have responded differently to the U.S. empire amassing proxy forces on its border than the U.S. would have responded to the same kind of threat on its own borders. The frenetic mental contortions needed to justify this ridiculous double standard are only possible because the West is saturated in domestic propaganda, manipulating the way they think about the world. It makes sense for there to be criticism of Russia for its role in this war, and for people to be horrified by the nightmare that's been happening in Ukraine these last few years. What makes absolutely no sense whatsoever is for Western liberals, or progressives, or whatever they want to call themselves, to assign 0% responsibility to their own government and its allies for their extensively documented role in sparking this conflict, and 100% responsibility to a foreign government with no power over them. That's pathetic, bootlicking behavior, and it's utterly inexcusable. Stop performing mental gymnastics to defend the abuses of your rulers. Have a little dignity, for God's sake. It is good that Trump appears to be moving toward ending an unwinnable proxy war that Ukrainians no longer want to fight. Anyone who disagrees with this is a dogshit human being. I am not grateful to Trump for ending this nightmare. I'm just disgusted with anyone who's against doing so. The proxy war in Ukraine was going to end sometime relatively soon anyway. The only way for NATO to reverse Russia's steady gains at this point would be to intervene more directly in ways that would risk nuclear consequences that Western leaders aren't willing to receive. This was always a chess game for them. They're not going to put their own necks on the line. So the war had to end. The Trumpists are just the faction that the empire has tasked with advancing this agenda. I will not waste any gratitude on Trump rolling back a failed imperial bid to weaken Russia, but I will absolutely scream my fucking lungs out at anyone who insists Ukrainians should keep throwing their bodies into a war that Ukrainians themselves no longer support. If you want the Ukraine war to continue, then go enlist and put your body on the line so that Ukrainians don't have to. The Ukrainian Foreign Legion is still accepting volunteers. If you want this horrific war to continue, either go and fight or shut the fuck up. Stop tweeting from the sofa in your safe, comfortable home and get your ass to the front line. Bring along as many Western liberals as you can convince to join your cause. The Western Empire provoked this war. The Western Empire sabotaged peace talks in the early weeks after the invasion. They refused off-ramp after off-ramp in pushing Ukraine into this situation, and as a result, Ukraine is going to be much worse off than before this all started. Wanting Ukraine to keep throwing human lives into the meat grinder in the hopes that they can recover all their lost territory is just sunk cost fallacy at this point. Ukrainians now recognize that it's time to cut their losses and negotiate a peace. Western armchair warriors need to recognize this too.